Hello, this is Andrew Rogers, also known as Lords of Gallipae Games, and Smunchy, also known as Sean.
That's right.
And yeah, if I forget your name, forgive me. I'm terrible with names.
You're fine.
And we will be discussing the lore of Gallipae. And Sean will be asking me questions, and I will be answering them off the top of my head to the best of my ability.
That's right. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Oh, good. Are you ready, Andrew?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this.
Shoot me a question.
Um, let's just start from what is Lords of Gallipae?
Lords of Gallipae Games LLC is my company, if that's what you were asking.
Well, you can start there. That's a good one.
It is a it started as a fantasy tabletop RPG making company, but I am branching out into board games, computer games, video games, all sorts of projects. And I also have a couple of books that are on their way, one of which I hope to have by the end of December. Maybe not, because I haven't been working on it in a while. It just needs some editing and some art, so that would be nice.
Okay. What are the names of those books?
One is the one that I have been working on more recently is Gallipae and Historical Codex, and
okay,
that one's basically just what it says. It's a collection of entries from a historian's point of view of Gallipae.
Okay, that's awesome.
And then the other one is the incredible line of the Frunkian court. And that is... We'll go into a little bit more about it in a later episode, I'm sure. But Frunk is an ogre king, and he's a real big character in the history of Gallipae. And this goes into his line of rulers that came after he did. So it specifically, this volume talks about his children, his grandchildren, and maybe a great-grandchild? I'm not sure. I don't remember. But there's like 8 or 9 different short stories compiled into this one book.
Okay, so you're talking about ogres, so it sounds like Lords of Gallipae is very much more fantasy-based. Is that correct?
It is definitely fantasy-based. I have one science fiction game out there, but it is not a Gallipae game. It is a completely different universe. So that one is actually on hold for a while because I got so frustrated with creating everything all over again.
Okay, well that makes sense. So, all right. So, knowing that this is fantasy, would you say that this is high fantasy? I mean, you mentioned ogres, so.
I'm a little rusty on the different definitions of high fantasy, and actually, when I tried to look it up one time, everybody had a different definition. So
you're right.
So, define what you mean by high fantasy.
So, there's different races, more than just humans. There's lots of magic, lots of fantastical wizardry happening.
Definitely.
All of that.
Definitely.
Okay, cool.
And you'll notice in some of these pictures, like the one that's up now, the rivers, it's been pointed out to me that the rivers are quote unquote wrong. And there's actually a fantasy based reason for that I will get into probably much later.
Oh, cool. Okay, so it sounds like then your fantasy world is not only high fantasy, but it's essentially define some of the laws of physics in some cases, or not just laws of physics, but
Uh,
laws like earthly laws in general, right?
There's artifacts that alter the way nature flows.
Now that's great. That's a good piece of lore right there. Yeah, we'll definitely have to get into that part later then. So in this case, since you mentioned ogres and we talked about high fantasy here, how many playable races are there right now in Lords of Gallipae?
In the first game that I have out there, which is Heroes of Gallipae, it's something I'm working on, that not everything is going to be of Gallipae, but Heroes of Gallipae, there were, I'm not sure, there are quite a few races compared to other games, and let's see. There's the standard ones, halfling, half elf, half orc, not half ogre. That's a different game. Then there's, I don't know if I mentioned human, but all those standard ones that like D&D has and everybody has.
Okay.
And then there's a few that I added in Heroes of Gallipae 1.5, which is the most current edition that is out. I believe the ones I added in that are Firekin, which is my answer to Azers.
Okay.
But instead of being like fiery dwarves, they're like fiery humans.
Well, that's interesting.
And they were cut off from most civilization for the majority of Gallipae's history. So they're kind of their civilization evolved in a different way. And then there's the Boar Folk. That's a creation of my own. Let's see, what else is there? There's Cavern Crawlers, which are basically Underdark humans.
Okay. That's fun.
And there's Wolfman, which are not werewolves.
Okay, so they're more anthropomorphic, sentient beings.
Yeah, they just have a lot. They look like the what's it called? The hybrid form of a werewolf.
Okay.
But they act in their culture is tribal and very basic. I hesitate to say basic, but yeah.
Almost primitive, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then let's see, what else is there? I know I'm missing something. I can't remember what else I'm missing. I'm missing one other though. And then I added a couple of races for anybody who buys the full game with the members page password. The great thing about Heroes of Gallipae is when you buy the game, you get a password and you can go to my website with the password and get all the updates and extras and modules and such for free. So you never have to buy anything with my game except just the package of my game.
Okay, that's awesome. So what? So this is more even just out of my own curiosity, which I'm sure everyone else listening right now would like to know too. Knowing that you have 1.5 out, and then you mentioned you have another release. Are these in different lands? Is this in the same land? Maybe you can talk a little bit about like how many continents there are, or how that all works in Gallipae.
Okay, so Gallipae is basically Earth 1.0.
Okay.
So Earth and the universe of Earth comes after the creator destroys Gallipae and its universe. And then he decides to keep magic to himself and blah, 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 all that we have now. So that's how it ties in with the real world. So Gallipae is actually based, the world that, the era that 1.5 is set in is actually based on Earth. So there's Europe, there's Africa, there's Asia, there's the Americas, and I'm not sure if Australia is going to be in there, and Antarctica is not in there.
Okay, interesting. So, I mean, where's the play of focus then right now within the story? Or in 1.5 or both?
In 1.5, you can choose. I'm trying to map out the entire world on Incarnate.
Okay.
But right now, let's get to where I can see the maps that you're on. So, if we wait just a little while, I can tell you which maps are what.
Okay.
So this map that's up right now is the Forgotten World, which is before the world of 1.5. This is also the Forgotten World, a different spot. And I'm sorry that you can't see all this, Smunchy. And
that's all right.
This is the first world, which is after the Forgotten World, and this is the first world. They're going really fast. But the last two, the first world is what 1.5 is in. And the first one that I said was the first world was the Elven territory, the Empire of the Moon. The second one was the Lord of the Dead's territory. Now, a little bit of a difference between me and most fantasy people. You know, usually when you ask someone who makes a fantasy game, what is the most powerful undead in the world? They're going to say something like Lich or some variant of a Lich or something like that. They're not going to say, or a drake or a dragon, an undead dragon. They're not going to say vampire. Now, when I created the Lord of the Dead's character, I didn't know about liches. I didn't know about a lot of this other stuff. To me, vampires were the most powerful. So that's how it stayed. And one of the pieces of lore is that the Lord of the Dead, who is a vampire and has increased in power almost infinitely because he's the oldest vampire, he's the very first vampire. He created the process for creating liches as a way of creating massively powerful undead that are completely under his control. So there's the idea, the common belief is that the Lord of the Dead holds the secret to eternal life when it's really eternal slavery to him.
Oh, okay. Well, now that's interesting. What exactly is his role in Gallipae?
The Lord of the Dead has actually become a deity because of his incredible power. And his role is as the ultimate leader of all undead. Right there in his name.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. And so it all traces back to him. But in my games, every deity has to worship another deity. Now that it boils down to 3 other deities, and these are only technically all 3. Not all of them are normal deities. 2 of them are only technically deities. There's the grand god Klamas, which is worshipped by all good, neutral, or lawful deities. And then there is Inferno, who is the master of all demons, devils, and evil and chaotic deities. And then there's death, the entity of death. And death is what controls all of the undead deities. So the Lord of the Dead ultimately answers to death, although he would never admit it.
Interesting.
And
okay.
And the other undead deities answer to the Lord of the Dead and then to death.
Okay. So in total, I mean, how many deities are we talking? I mean, granted, you just said you had the top 3, but you mentioned there were more.
Yeah. I don't remember a count of them off the top of my head. I remember that I had about maybe a dozen in the first iteration of this game. And then I made sure there were at least several more than D&D 3.5 had in its Deities and Demigods handbook. But what I mean by that is how many were in the D&D pantheon in the Deities and Demigods handbook. So I didn't go. What I did was I went to every deity in the D&D pantheon, and I'm like, okay, is there a deity that answers the same needs in my game? And if not, I created one. I gave it its own backstory, its own, personality, but it answered the same needs, because in real mythology, there were a lot of deities that mirrored each other, because those are the needs that needed to be met. So
That's right. Okay.
So I just went and made sure I had as many deities as in D&D, and then a few more, because I came up with some stuff that D&D didn't cover.
Okay. Well, that's great.